In this section, we will discuss the control of hormones. In the endocrine system, the control of hormones is of three types of stimuli that regulate hormone release: humoral stimuli, neural stimuli, and hormonal stimuli. No matter what stimulus releases the hormone, most hormones' blood level fluctuates within a homeostatic range through negative feedback mechanisms. In a few instances, positive feedback mechanisms also regulate blood hormone levels. Let's discuss starting with control by humoral stimuli. Blood-borne chemicals can directly stimulate the release of some hormones. These chemicals are referred to as humoral stimuli because they circulate in the blood, and here the word humoral refers to body fluids, including blood. These hormones are sensitive to the blood levels of a particular substance, such as calcium, sodium, glucose, or potassium. This shows that when the blood level of a particular chemical substance occurs, the release of hormones results. Let me tell you with some examples. If the parathyroid gland senses a change in the chemical concentration of calcium in the blood, parathyroid hormone is released in response to humoral stimuli. As another example, if a runner has just finished a long race during hot weather, he may not produce urine for up to 12 hours, which means a decrease in urine output because his elevated concentration of blood solutes stimulates the release of a water-conservative hormone called antidiuretic hormone, ADH, from kidney tubules. Similarly, elevated blood glucose levels directly stimulate insulin secretion by the pancreas, and elevated blood potassium levels directly stimulate aldosterone release by the adrenal cortex. These examples are just a few of the stimulation of hormones released by humoral stimuli. Now, inhibition of hormone release by humoral stimuli. There exists a companion hormone that opposes those of the secreted hormone that counteracts the secreted hormone's action. For example, to raise or increase blood pressure, the adrenal cortex secretes the hormone aldosterone in response to low blood pressure. However, if blood pressure goes up, the heart secretes the hormone atrial natriuretic peptide, ANP, which lowers blood pressure. Therefore, aldosterone and ANP work together to maintain homeostasis of blood pressure. Moving towards the second type of control of hormones involves neural stimuli of endocrine glands. Neurons release a neurotransmitter into the synapse with the cells that produce the hormone by following an action potential. The neurotransmitter stimulates the cells to increase or decrease the release of hormones, which shows the neural control of hormone secretion from cells of an endocrine gland. For example, in response to stimuli such as stress or exercise, the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system stimulates the adrenal medulla to secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine, which help the body respond to the stimulus. Responses include an elevated heart rate and increased blood flow through the exercising muscles. This shows the stimulation of neural stimuli. Well, some neurons secrete chemical messengers directly into the blood when stimulated, making these chemical messengers or hormones called neuropeptides. Specialized neuropeptides stimulate hormone secretion from other endocrine cells and are called releasing hormones, a term usually reserved for hormones from the hypothalamus. Now, inhibition of hormone release by neural stimuli. Neurons also inhibit target cells. If the neurotransmitter is inhibitory, the target endocrine gland does not secrete its hormone. For example, when the stimulus is no longer present, the neural stimulation declines and the secretion of epinephrine and norepinephrine decreases. Moving forward toward the third type of control of hormones, by hormonal stimuli. As the name implies, this would be the control of hormones by other hormones. It occurs when a hormone is secreted that, in turn, stimulates the secretion of other hormones. The most common examples are releasing hormones from the hypothalamus that act on the anterior pituitary gland. Those hormones are called tropic hormones. The pituitary tropic hormones then travel to another endocrine gland cell and stimulate or inhibit the release of hormones in response to stimuli. For example, the thyrotropin-releasing hormone from the hypothalamus stimulates thyroid-stimulating hormones from the anterior pituitary gland that causes the regulation of the secretion of thyroid hormones from the thyroid gland. Now, the inhibition of hormone release by hormonal stimuli. Some hormones prevent the secretion of other hormones, which is a common mode of hormone regulation. For example, hormones from the hypothalamus that prevent the secretion of tropic hormones from the pituitary gland are called inhibiting hormones. Thyroid hormones can also control blood levels by inhibiting pituitary tropic hormones. Without the original stimulus, less thyroid hormone is released. Now we're focusing on the two major mechanisms that maintain hormone levels in the blood within a homeostatic range are negative feedback and positive feedback. Negative feedback is the more common mechanism for regulating hormone secretion. Positive feedback is rare. Negative feedback. In endocrine systems, negative feedback means that some feature of hormone action, directly or indirectly, inhibits the further secretion of the hormone. Negative feedback is self-limiting. Now you will see the negative feedback loop for illustrative purposes. The hypothalamus is shown relative to the anterior pituitary, which is shown relative to the peripheral endocrine gland. The hypothalamus secretes a releasing hormone, which stimulates the secretion of an anterior pituitary hormone. The anterior pituitary hormone then acts on a peripheral endocrine gland, for example, the testis, to cause secretion of the hormone such as testosterone, which acts on the target tissues that might be skeletal muscle to produce physiologic actions. The hormone's feedback on the anterior pituitary and the hypothalamus also controls hormone secretions. Long-loop feedback means that the hormone feeds back to the hypothalamic pituitary axis. Short-loop feedback means that the anterior pituitary hormone feeds back on the hypothalamus to inhibit the secretion of the hypothalamic releasing hormone. There is also a third possibility called ultra-short-loop feedback, in which the hypothalamic hormone inhibits its secretion. For example, growth hormone-releasing hormone, GHRH, inhibits GHRA secretion. Let's discuss a common example of insulin regulating blood glucose concentration. You know, insulin secretion is turned on or off by changes in the blood glucose concentration. When blood glucose concentration is high, insulin secretion from the pancreas is turned on. Insulin then acts on its target tissues, such as the liver, muscle, and adipose tissues, to decrease the blood glucose concentration back to normal. When the glucose concentration is sensed as being low enough, insulin is no longer needed and its secretion is turned off. So the negative feedback mechanism helps to normalize things when they start becoming too extreme. Now, focus the positive feedback. Positive feedback is uncommon. With positive feedback, some hormone action feature causes more hormone secretion. Positive feedback is self-augmenting. In hormonal systems, here you will see the positive feedback loop. For illustrative purposes, the hypothalamus is shown relative to the anterior pituitary, which is shown relative to the peripheral endocrine gland. As we have studied previously, the hypothalamus releases the gonadotropin-releasing hormone GnRH. Well, the primary example of positive feedback is the effect of estrogen on the secretion of the follicle-stimulating hormone FSH and luteinizing hormone LH by the anterior pituitary at the midpoint of the menstrual cycle. During the follicular phase of the menstrual cycle, the ovaries secrete estrogen, which acts on the anterior pituitary to produce a rapid burst of FSH and LH secretion. FSH and LH have two effects on the ovaries: ovulation and stimulation of estrogen secretion. Thus, estrogen secreted from the ovaries acts on the anterior pituitary to cause secretion of FSH and LH, and these anterior pituitary hormones cause more estrogen secretion. In this example, the explosive event is the burst of FSH and LH that precedes ovulation. The second example of hormonal positive feedback is oxytocin. Dilation of the cervix causes the posterior pituitary to secrete oxytocin. In turn, oxytocin stimulates uterine contraction, which causes further dilation of the cervix. In this example, the explosive event is parturition, that is the delivery of the fetus, so this shows positive feedback. Remember that multiple hormones may act on the same target cells at the same time, often with unpredictable reactions. There are three basic types of hormone interactions: permissive effect, synergistic effect, Antagonistic effect. Let's first discuss permissiveness. When one hormone is not able to exert its full effects without the presence of another hormone. For example, epinephrine alone only weakly stimulates lipolysis, means a breakdown of triglycerides, but when small amounts of thyroid hormones T3 and T4 are present, the same amount of epinephrine stimulates lipolysis much more powerfully. Now synergism. When one hormone produces the same effects as another hormone at the target cell, amplifying their combined effects. For example, the normal development of oocytes in the ovaries requires both follicle-stimulating hormones from the anterior pituitary and estrogens from the ovaries. Neither hormone alone is sufficient. The last one is antagonism. When one hormone opposes another hormone's actions, for example, when insulin is antagonized by glucagon. Insulin lowers blood glucose levels, while glucagon raises them, the opposite effect. So that was all about today's lecture, where we study the control of hormones by humoral, neural, and hormonal stimuli, and then the negative feedback, positive feedback, and hormone interactions. Finally, we have covered all the concepts starting from hormones, their classes, synthesis, transport, metabolism, excretion, mechanism of action, control of hormones, and lastly, interaction also. So this was all about the endocrine control lecture that was full of informative knowledge. I hope this video will help to boost your concepts and knowledge regarding endocrine physiology. Happy learning, and thank you so much for watching.
Have you ever heard of video books? sqadia.com is delighted to present video books, medical books that have been tailored into a series of videos. sqadia.com videos are presented in the same order as the book's chapters. Explore now and make your learning easy.